Daf Yomi, track to Menachot, page 72. B, top of the page, with the words Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon lo Shamia le. The Gemara asks, and did Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, not know of this? He must have known of his father's statement that a mitzvah performed at its proper time overrides Shabbat. If so, his ruling that reaping at an improper time is unfit cannot be proven from the fact that reaping the Omer overrides Shabbat, as claimed earlier. Ela shani hosam sharei dachato shchitas Shabbos. Rather, it must be that Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, was aware of that principle, and nevertheless he maintains that the requirement to perform a mitzvah at its optimal time does not apply to the case of the reaping of the Omer. This is because there, in the case of the burning of the fats and limbs, it is different, as the slaughter of the animal already overrode Shabbat. Therefore, it is dear to perform the burning of its fats and limbs at the proper time, even on Shabbat. One cannot apply this reasoning to the reaping of the Omer, as there is no prior labor performed on Shabbat before the reaping. Consequently, the reason it may be performed on Shabbat must be that it would be unfit if reaped any other time. Ule Rabbi Hachanami dachte shchitas Shabbos. Savar Rabbi Katzis oi b'noi dachas Shabbos. Oi dachas Shabbos. The Gemara asked, but if so, according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he should agree that the case of the burning of the sacrifice's fats and limbs is different from the Omer, since also there the slaughter of the animal already overrode Shabbat. Therefore, the Gemara gives a new explanation. Rather, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds that in fact the reaping of the Omer crop does not override Shabbat, in contrast to the opinion of Rabbi Yishmael. For this reason, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's ruling that the Omer is fit if reaped at an improper time does not conflict with the principle of his teacher, Rabbi Akiva, that any prohibited labor that can be performed on Shabbat Eve does not override Shabbat. V'la v'yatzanan chachamim oimrim echad Shabbos v'echad choil mishalosh hoyaba did Rabbi. The Gemara asks, and does Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi not maintain that the reaping of the Omer overrides Shabbat? But did we learn in the Mishnah 63b in response to Rabbi Yishmael's opinion that when the 16th of Nisan occurred during the week, 5 sa'ah of barley were reaped, and when it occurred on Shabbat, only 3 sa'ah were reaped? And the rabbis say both on Shabbat and during the week, the Omer offering would come from 3 sa'ah. In any case, according to both opinions, the Omer was reaped on Shabbat. The Gemara answers that Mishnah is not according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. That Mishnah is not in accordance to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. The Chachamim oimrim echad Shabbos v'echad choil b'shlosh kupois b'shlosh megalois t'loi kerebi. The Gemara raises a difficulty from the latter clause of that Mishnah. Rabbi Chanina, the deputy high priest, says on Shabbat the barley was reaped by an individual with 1 sickle and 1 basket into which the barley was placed, whereas during the week it was reaped by 3 people with 3 baskets and 3 sickles. And the rabbis say both on Shabbat and during the week it is reaped by 3 people with 3 baskets and 3 sickles. According to both opinions, the Omer was reaped on Shabbat. The Gemara again responds that clause of the Mishnah is also not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. The Gemara raises another difficulty from Mishnah 65a that describes a series of questions posed by the court emissary who reaps the grain to those assembled to witness the process. And if the 16th of Nisan occurs on Shabbat, The court emissary says to those assembled, shall I cut these sheaves on this Shabbat? The assembly says in response, yes. The Gemara answers that clause of the Mishnah is also not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Next time Yom Kosher, Shabbos, Man Shabbos, Leidomah. Next time Yom Kosher, Rabbi Yehuda Shabbos, Ma'elav Katzira Loi Le'akrove. The Gemara raises a difficulty from the Mishnah 71a. If the Omer was reaped during the day, it is fit, and it overrides Shabbat. Now, whom did you hear who said, if the Omer was reaped during the day, it is fit? It is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and yet it is taught in the Mishnah, and it overrides Shabbat. What? Is it not referring to reaping? The Gemara answers, no. It is referring to the sacrifice of the Omer offering. Ela niktsir lo. V'atanya b'omer v'davar Moshe b'yad Hashem matav lefi sholomanu u'pesach shenevach behen b'moado v'afilu b'shavos b'moado v'afilu b'tumah. The Gemara asks, but with regard to reaping, does it not override Shabbat according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, as isn't it taught in a Braita that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said the following halacha based upon the verse, and Moses declared the appointed times of the Lord to the children of Israel, Leviticus 23:44. What is the meaning when the verse states this phrase? This phrase is necessary because we had learned only that the daily offering and the paschal offering override Shabbat and ritual impurity, as it is stated concerning them in its appointed time. See Numbers 9:2 and 28 verse 2, from which it is derived that each of them must be sacrificed in its appointed time, and even on Shabbat in its appointed time, and even in ritual impurity. Sha'ar karbanos hatzibur minayin tamid lo amal ele ta'asu l'Hashem b'moadechem. The Braita continues with regard to the rest of the communal offerings, from where is it derived that they likewise override Shabbat and ritual impurity. The verse states with regard to additional offerings that are brought on the festivals, these you shall sacrifice to the Lord in your appointed times. Numbers 29:39. Minayin l'rabbis oimer v'yakorim imo yishter lechem v'yakorim mohen tamen lo imal v'yidavar Moshe b'yadeh shem ha'kosav kavav moed lechulam. The Braita continues, from where is it derived to include in this halacha the omer and the lambs that are sacrificed with it, the 2 loaves sacrificed at Shavuot, and the communal peace offerings that are sacrificed with them. The verse states, and Moses declared the appointed times of the Lord to the children of Israel, after it lists Shabbat and the festivals. This indicates that the verse established one time for all of them. All of these days are considered appointed times, and their offerings are not deferred. The Gemara analyzes the Braita with regard to what ritual does the Braita state that these offerings override Shabbat. If we say for actual sacrifice, this cannot be correct, as are the 2 loaves fit for sacrifice. The 2 loaves are not sacrificed on the altar at all. Rather, they are waved and later eaten by priests. The Gemara concludes its interpretation of the Braita, which leads to the question about the opinion of Yehuda Hanasi. Rather, it is obvious that the 2 loaves override Shabbat with regard to grinding and sifting, and if so, similarly with regard to the Omer offering, it overrides Shabbat with regard to the process of reaping the grains, and as the Braita is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, evidently he maintains that the reaping of the Omer overrides Shabbat. Ela Omer HaKrovesh De'elechem Le'avyo V'Somer Rabbi Tanam Mekadesh I Apela V'Yetbol Epsalel Lavalino. The Gemara answers, rather, one must say that the Braita is not referring to comparable cases. As far as the Omer is concerned, it overrides Shabbat only with regard to its actual sacrifice, but when it comes to the 2 loaves, it overrides Shabbat with regard to its baking. And the reason why the 2 loaves must be baked on Shabbat is because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds that the oven consecrates that which is baked inside it. Therefore, if one were to bake from the previous day on the eve of Shavuot, he would effectively be disqualifying it from being brought on Shavuot day, as it would be disqualified by being left overnight. The Sofer Rabbi Tanu Chadash, Betanya Kivse Etzeres, Ein Mekach Yerusalechem El B'Shchita Ketzad Jachton Lishman Yisrael Lishman Kadesh Alechem. The Gemara asks, and does Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi really hold that the oven consecrates that which is baked inside? But isn't it Tana bright to the communal peace offering of 2 lambs that accompanies the 2 loaves sacrificed on the festival of Shavuot, consecrate the loaves that accompany them only by means of their slaughter? How so? If one slaughtered the lambs for their own sake, meaning as lambs for Shavuot in the appropriate manner, and the priest sprinkled their blood for their own sake, the loaves are consecrated. Shachtan shlo lishman v'zarak daman shlo lishman Chadash alechem shachata lishman v'zarak daman shlo lishman alechem kodesh v'nekodesh de'rameo. The Braita continues, but if one slaughtered them not for their own sake, and the priest sprinkled their blood not for their own sake, the loaves are not consecrated, as the factors indispensable in rendering the offering fit were not properly performed. If one slaughtered them not for their own sake, and he sprinkled their blood not for their own sake, the fact that the lambs were properly slaughtered renders the loaves partially consecrated. Therefore, the loaves are consecrated to the extent that they cannot be redeemed. But they are not consecrated to the extent that they may be eaten. This is a statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Elazar Shimon Omer, Le'olam eno kadosh, ad shishchot lishman v'yizrok daman lishman. Rabbi Elazar the son of Rabbi Shimon says, actually, the loaves are consecrated only when one slaughters the offerings for their own sake and sprinkles their blood for their own sake, meaning only if both factors indispensable in rendering the offering fit were properly performed. Apparently, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds that it is the slaughter of the lamb that consecrates the loaves, not baking the loaves in the oven. Amar Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak, hukveu velo hukveu kol kama. Hadran alach Rabbi Shmuel. We shall return to you, B'ezras Hashem, Rabbi Shmuel. We completed this perek and continue on to the next one. But first, let's read the English. Rabbi Nachman bar Yitzchak says, actually, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi does hold that the oven consecrates the loaves. But the Braita is saying, when it uses the categories of consecrated and not consecrated with regards to the slaughter of the lambs, is that either the 2 loaves are fixed as Shavuot meal offerings and cannot be used for any other offering, or they are not fixed as Shavuot meal offerings. In other words, if the lambs are slaughtered and the blood sprinkled in the proper manner, one cannot change the designation of the loaves, whereas if they were not slaughtered and their blood was not sprinkled properly, one can change their designation. If the lambs are slaughtered properly, but their blood was sprinkled improperly, the status of the loaves is subject to a dispute. This has nothing to do with when the loaves are consecrated. Hadron Alach, Rabbi Shmuel, we shall turn to you, Rabbi Shmuel, continuing on to the next perek. Okay. Which is called Ve'elu minochois nikmatzois. Zog de Mishneh, zog de Heilige Mishneh, Ve'elu matzos nikmatzois, u'shorei lekohanim. Minchas asoiles, ve'machvas, ve'macheshes, ve'chalois, ve'arkikin, minchas goim, minchas noshim, minchas oimel, minchas choit, minchas kinois. And these are the meal offerings from which a handful is removed, and the remainder of the offering is eaten by the priests. The meal offering of fine flour, the meal offering prepared in a pan, machavas is a pan, and the meal offering prepared in a deep pan. Okay. And the meal offering baked in an oven that is brought entirely of loaves, and the meal offering baked in an oven that is brought entirely of wafers, and the meal offering of Gentiles, and the meal offering of women, and the Omer meal offering, meaning the measure of barley, brought as a communal offering on the 16th of Nisan, and the meal offering of a sinner, and the meal offering of jealousy brought by a sota. Rabbi Shimon Omer Menachot Kohanim Nikbeses V'Kohanim Tzchav V'Atzmoi V'Shirayim Mingreivin L'Atzmon. Rabbi Shimon says, although its remainder is not eaten by priests, as meal offerings of priests are burned in their entirety, as it is written, and every meal offering of the priest shall be offered in its entirety, it shall not be eaten. Leviticus 6:16. Nevertheless, with regard to the meal offering of a sinner brought by one of the priests, a handful is removed, and a handful is sacrificed on the altar by itself, and the remainder is sacrificed on the altar by itself. That's the Mishnah, now the Talmud. Zog the Talmud of Rav Popo, Kol Heicha Ditnan, Eser Tenan, Maika Mashmelon. The Gemara says Rav Papa stated a principle with regard to all the Mishnayot in Tractate Menachot. Anywhere that we learned in a Mishnah that one brings a meal offering, we learned that one must bring 10 items of the same type, either loaves or wafers. The Gemara asks, what is Rav Papa teaching us? As this is already stated by Rav Yehuda in the Mishnah. The Gemara answers this statement of Rav Papa serves to exclude the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who said, one who takes a vow to bring a meal offering baked in an oven must bring 10 items. If he wishes, he may bring 10 loaves or 10 wafers. And if he wishes, he may bring half of them as loaves and the other half as wafers. Rav Papa teaches us that the Tana of the Mishnah maintains that one may not do so. All 10 must be of the same type. Ushirei lekohanim minolan dichsivo ksivo delu ksivo ksivba dezoishtoyer asamincho alchevo isabnei haroin legoymel v'noiseres mimeni yochel haroin u'malal. The Mishnah teaches, and their remainder is eaten by the priests. The Gemara asks, from where do we derive this halakha? The Gemara challenges the question. That which is written explicitly is written in the case of several meal offerings, including the gift meal offering brought by an individual. The Torah clearly states that the priests eat the remainder. And with regard to that which is not written explicitly, it is written of it. And this is the law of the meal offering. The sons of Aaron shall offer it before the Lord, and he shall take up from its handful and shall make the memorial part of its smoke upon the altar, and the remainder of it shall Aaron and his sons eat. Leviticus 6:7-9. These verses establish the principle that if the priests eat the remainders of meal offerings, even where the Torah does not state this explicitly, therefore it is unnecessary to ask for a source. The Gemara explains the original question with regard to a meal offering that comes from wheat. We did not ask. That is included in the cited verse. When we asked, it was with regard to a meal offering that comes from barley, meaning the Omer meal offering and the meal offering brought by Sota. From where is it derived the remainders of those offerings are given to the priests? The Gemara responds with regard to one that comes from barley also, since a handful it is removed, As the Torah states with regard to all meal offerings, Leviticus 6:8, clearly its remainder is given to the priests, as why else would a handful be removed and offered? Lo komi boilan ki komi boilan aliba do shimon dama ikamincha demik kamso below mitafela. The Gemara clarifies, according to the opinion of the rabbis who hold that the priests eat the remainder of all meal offerings from which a handful is removed, we did not ask about the source. When we asked, it was according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who said there is a type of meal offering of which a handful is removed, but its remainder is not eaten. It's not. Rabbi Shimon Omer binchas choite shel kohanim nikmetzes hakomen tzukarav be'atzmo v'shirayim krayim yaspo menalan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon says, from the meal offering of a sinner brought by a priest, a handful is removed. Subsequently, the handful is sacrificed on the altar by itself, and the remainder is sacrificed on the altar by itself. Therefore, the question is according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the priests do not always eat the remainder when a handful is removed. From where do we derive that the priests eat the remainder of barley-based meal offerings? Amar Chizkiah, Damar Kra Kol Mincha Belul B'Shem B'Charev V'Kol B'nei Aaron Tiyeh Yemeinu Inyan Lebelula Shel Chitin Tenei Inyan Lebelula Shel Soirin V'Yemeinu Inyan Chareva Shel Chitin Tenei Inyan Chareva Shel Soirin. The Gemara answers, Chizkiah said, the source is from a verse, as the verse states, and every meal offering mixed with oil or dry shall all the sons of Aaron have. Leviticus 7:10. The verse is analyzed. If it is not necessary for the matter of a mixed meal offering of wheat, which is derived from the verse cited earlier, apply it to the matter of a mixed meal offering of barley, meaning the meal offering of the omer. And if the verse is not necessary for the matter of a dry meal offering of wheat, which is derived from the verse cited earlier, apply it to the matter of a dry meal offering of barley, meaning the meal offering of a sota. The Gemara asks, and this verse, does it come to teach us this halacha? Isn't the verse necessary for that which is taught in Braita? From where is it derived that priests may not receive a share of meal offerings in exchange for a share of animal offerings? Meaning, one may not exchange his share of meal offering for the equivalent value of meat from an animal offering of which he did not receive a share. You can't trade him in. You can't trade a mincha for meat. Be continued.